The Chargers' offensive performance against Jacksonville collapsed under the weight of inefficient early down production, limited separation in the passing game, and a run game that produced almost no yards before contact. Justin Herbert completed 10 of 18 passes for 81 yards, with 1 interception, producing just 4.5 yards per attempt and a 55.6% completion rate. The passing map and concept data show that Herbert generated almost all of his positive production on short throws, 0 to 9 yards, and behind-the-line concepts, while intermediate and deep attempts were either covered or disrupted. His 18 attempts plus 2 sacks yielded 20 total dropbacks. Jacksonville generated 9 total pressures on those plays, a pressure rate of 45%, and converted 2 of those pressures into sacks, a 22% sack per pressure rate. Herbert's interception, coming on an intermediate throw between the numbers, highlights how Jacksonville compressed the passing windows and forced the Chargers into low-value attempts. Even though the Chargers' offensive line performed well in true pass sets, several linemen graded above 80 in pass blocking with 0 sacks allowed in pure dropback situations. Herbert's average throw location remained short, cautious, and timing-based, reflecting a secondary that consistently capped explosive opportunities. The receiving core mirrored the constrained output. Keenan Allen was the lone source of explosive value, generating 44 yards on only 4 targets for 11.0 yards per target and 14.7 yards per reception. His 30-yard shot against Montaric Brown accounted for over 1/3 of Herbert's total passing output. Ladd McConkey functioned as a low-depth possession option, catching 3 of 4 targets, but producing only 3.25 yards per target and 4.3 yards per reception. Orand Gadsden, too, caught 1 pass, a 13-yard touchdown over Devin Lloyd, but was otherwise limited to a 33% catch rate across 3 targets. Running backs were completely neutralized as receiving threats, with Kimani Vidal and Travion Williams combining for 3 receptions for -1 yard. Derived metrics reinforced the inefficiency. The entire receiving group produced 68.8% catch rate, but only 5.06 yards per target and 7.4 yards per reception, extremely low relative to both league baselines, and Herbert's typical production route location data shows that the Chargers gained nothing in vertical areas. They attempted almost no deep throws, only 1 deep right completion, and Herbert produced negative expected value on intermediate throws. Jacksonville's coverage forced the Chargers to operate exclusively in the shallow zones, where defenders quickly closed space and minimized yards after the catch. The run game contributed almost no structural value. As a team, the Chargers produced only 41 rushing yards on 13 attempts for 3.2 yards per carry more. Concerning than the average is the composition. Only 3 total yards came before first contact, yielding an extremely low yards before contact rate of 0.23 yards per carry. Nearly the entire run game depended on yards after contact, 38 of the total 41 yards, meaning defenders met the ball carrier almost immediately. At the line of scrimmage, Kimani Vidal finished with 5 carries for 13 yards, 2.6 yards per attempt, while Justin Herbert and Amar Johnson provided the only moderately successful attempts. Run-blocking grades confirm a lack of displacement at the point of attack. The interior offensive line struggled generating horizontal or vertical push, and Jacksonville's defensive front, especially Arik Armstead and Davon Hamilton, consistently reset the line of scrimmage. The lack of early down run efficiency forced the Chargers into predictable second and long sequences, tightening Jacksonville's coverage structure and reducing the value of play action. The Chargers never approached a balanced, leverage-creating script, and their early down schedule was consistently negative. Defensively, the Chargers' coverage performance was polarized. The outside cornerbacks were excellent, while the linebacker group allowed the majority of Jacksonville's passing output. Dante Jackson surrendered 2 catches on 3 targets for only 21 yards, 7.0 yards per target, while Benjamin St-Juste, Derwin James Jr., and Cam Hart allowed either 0 or minimal yardage. Jacksonville recognized this quickly and shifted their passing attack into the middle of the field, targeting linebackers Dion Henley, Troy Dye, and Denzel Perryman on crossers, seams, and option routes. Henley, in particular, was the matchup stress point. He allowed 5 receptions on 5 targets for 63 yards, yielding 12.6 yards per target and 12.6 yards per reception. Perryman and Dye also allowed receptions of 16 and 15 yards respectively, often on in-breaking throws where the Jaguars forced them into space. The derived metrics spell out the structural vulnerability. Linebackers accounted for more than half of Jacksonville's total passing yards, despite being targeted less frequently than corners or safeties. Jacksonville produced 153 passing yards on 14 completions, 10.9 yards per completion, with a 70% completion rate against the Chargers. Most of that production occurred against underneath defenders, not perimeter cornerbacks, a textbook funnel the ball inside defensive outcome that the Chargers were unable to mitigate. The Chargers' pass rush was surprisingly muted. Across more than 90 combined pass rush snaps, the unit generated only 7 pressures, a pressure rate between 7 and 8%. Well below league average, Trevor Lawrence was pressured on only 20% of his dropbacks, and on clean pockets, he generated 144 yards and 72.2% completion. Pressure to sack conversion was also low. Lawrence was sacked only once, despite 2 or 3 free rusher opportunities. Without consistent pressure, Jacksonville sustained drives by attacking intermediate space, maintaining favorable down and distance situations, and integrating play action effectively. Meanwhile, Jacksonville's own pass protection was nearly flawless, allowing 0 sacks in true pass sets and only 1 or 2 high-quality pressures on extended plays. The running game on the defensive side tells a similar story. Jacksonville rushed for 157 yards on 39 attempts for an even 4.0 yards per carry, with 4 total touchdowns. Derived metrics indicate that Jacksonville consistently reached the second level. They produced 92 yards after contact and broke 7 tackles across the game. Travis Etienne Jr. posted 19 carries for 73 yards, with 1.58 yards after contact per attempt and 5 missed tackles forced. Paishul Tutin added 75 yards on just 18 carries, 5.0 yards per attempt. With a long run of 15 yards and strong cutback efficiency, the Chargers' interior defenders, especially Teair Tart and Cam Hart, generated occasional wins. But the linebacker level again proved to be the structural weakness. Missed fits, delayed fills, and poor leverage angles turned modestly blocked plays into consistent 4 to 6 yard gains. Jacksonville's directional charts reflect strong performance off left guard, left tackle, and middle left, directly correlating with the Chargers' poorest run fit zones. This allowed Jacksonville to dictate terms, stay ahead of the sticks, and protect Lawrence from long yardage passing situations. Overall, the derived metrics paint a clear, unified picture. The Chargers were structurally sound on the perimeter, but deficient in the middle of the field on both offense and defense. Offensively, they could not generate early down run efficiency, which compressed their passing structure and forced Herbert into short, timing-based throws with low yardage value. Defensively, they played high-quality perimeter coverage, but were repeatedly exposed at linebacker, allowing Jacksonville to convert middle-of-field throws and finish drives with a powerful rushing attack, without pressure on the quarterback, without early down run success, and without second-level coverage reliability. The Chargers were never able to control tempo, dictate defensive rotations, or generate explosive plays. The final product reflects a team whose strengths, perimeter coverage, isolated receiver talent, and true pass protection, were neutralized by matchup disadvantages at tight end, in the box, and in the intermediate passing windows. 1. Global shape of the game. This was a game where Jacksonville controlled the run game and middle-of-the-field matchups, while the Chargers were forced into a compressed, low-volume passing script and never found a complementary run threat. Trevor Lawrence finished with 153 passing yards on 22 attempts, about 7.0 yards per attempt. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 63 to 64% completion, plus another rushing score. Herbert's line was much thinner, roughly 80 passing yards on 18 attempts, about 4.5 yards per attempt. 55 to 56% completion, 1 interception, with a few scrambles and designed keepers, but no consistent explosives. The raw attempt volume tells the story. Jacksonville threw efficiently on their terms, but they did not need volume because they ran it 35 to 40 times, for about 4.0 yards per carry and 4 rushing touchdowns, while the Chargers were stuck in the low teens in rushing attempts and never created a run-first stress point. Jaguars offense versus Chargers defense matchups. Attack the linebackers, protect the corners. The Jaguars' pass game was almost perfectly aligned with your usual pick on the linebackers and safeties, leave the corners alone rule. Jakobi Meyers, 6 targets, 5 catches, 64 yards, 4 first downs, with success versus Elijah Molden, Troy Dye, and especially Dion Henley. Henley's coverage grade, around 29, and line, 5 targets, 5 catches, 63 yards, 12.6 yards per reception allowed, shows he was the primary stress point. Johnny Munt, 2 targets, 2 catches, 25 yards, 16.0 yards per reception, 1 explosive versus Henley and 1 versus Denzel Perryman. Again, tight end isolated on linebackers. Tim Patrick and Austin Trammell combined 4 catches for 33 yards and multiple first downs, mostly on in-breaking and shallow routes versus safeties and nickel outside receivers. Parker Washington, Diami Brown were efficient when targeted. Washington 2 for 2, 20 yards. But the Jags didn't have to live on perimeter go balls. They lived in your short and intermediate between the numbers bucket. Lawrence's throw map backs that up. Almost all of his completions are between the numbers, especially in the 0 to 10 and 10 to 19 intermediate window. He barely touched deep outside left-right. The one deep shot that really mattered was an intermediate deep right throw, not constant vertical sideline access. This fits the coverage grades. Dante Jackson and Benjamin Saint-Just were excellent again on the perimeter, mid to high 70s in coverage, 3 to 5 targets combined, mostly short completions surrendered. The issue was the second level. Henley, Perryman, and even some of the deep safeties were negative when forced to carry seams, match crossers, or handle option routes from tight ends and slots. Run game, double teams, and cut-ups at the teeth of the front. On the ground, Jacksonville's split charts show steady, not flashy, success across the front. Team totals, 39 carries, approximately 157 yards, 4.0 yards per carry, 4 rushing touchdowns. Travis Etienne, 19 carries for approximately 73 yards and 2 scores. Tootin around 75 yards at 5.0 per carry. Lawrence chips in a few scrambles and a red zone keeper touchdown directionally. They were most efficient off left tackle / guard and middle, those LG/ML lanes where double teams can dent the front and put linebackers in conflict. You see solid yards after contact and multiple missed tackles in those columns. The Chargers' front four still produced some individual wins. T.R. Tart, Cam Hart, Khalil Mack all grade well versus the run, but the total picture shows too many successful short yardage conversions. Jacksonville living in 2nd and 5, 3rd and 2 rather than long distances, missed tackle cluster at linebacker, Henley, Troy Dye, and in safety alley fills when runs got to the second level. Very few true run stops at or behind the line. Jacksonville got lean forward for 3 instead of 2nd and 12. See pressure and protection. The pass rush versus pass blocking battle was closer than the scoring margin suggests. Jack's pass blocking was almost perfect. Multiple linemen with 85+ pass block grades, 0 sacks allowed in true pass sets, and only a handful of pressures total. Chargers' pass rush still generated pressure, roughly 7 total pressures, 1 sack, but it tended to arrive late in the down. Lawrence's pressure splits show efficiency when kept clean. Survivable output under pressure. Completion drops, but not catastrophic. He avoids negative explosives outside of the 1 interception. So the story here is not Chargers can't rush the passer. It's they could not force Jacksonville into pass-first leverage often enough to let their rush take over. 3 Chargers offense versus Jaguars defense. A. Coverage. Jaguars secondary quietly wins the day. On the other side, Jacksonville's coverage metrics tell you they won the down-to-down battle while giving up very little explosive damage. Thus, all receivers for Jack's defense. Jarrian Jones, slot corner, 4 targets, 3 catches, 22 yards, 7.3 per catch. 1 pass breakup, longest gain 12. Antonio Johnson, free safety. 1 target, 1 incompletion. Essentially erased his man Montaric Brown, outside corner. 3 targets, 1 catch, 30 yards, which is the big Keenan Allen shot, but only 1 completion allowed. Devin Lloyd, Andrew Wingard, Christian Braswell, all gave up single-digit target counts and modest yardage totals. Foy Olwoken, 4 targets, 3 catches, 13 yards, 4.3 per catch. So even the linebacker check-down window was mostly capped at short gains. Now overlay that on the Chargers' receiving line. Keenan Allen, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 44 yards, 14.7 yards per catch. 2 first downs, long of 30, that 30-yard strike versus Montaric Brown is the one true outside explosive. Ladd McConkey, 4 targets, 3 catches, 13 yards, 4.3, working mostly underneath and into traffic. Oronde Gadsden, 3 targets, 1 catch, 13 yards, and the lone passing touchdown versus Devin Lloyd. Kamani Vidal and Travion Williams, targeted out of the backfield, almost no yardage. Vidal ends up with 2 catches for -1 yards. Quentin Johnston, 1 target, 0 catches. Matchup tables confirm the picture. Keenan's targets were distributed across Jarrian Jones, Montaric Brown, Christian Braswell, and Oloken. Jarrian and Braswell kept him to 0 yards on their reps. Brown lost once deep. Oloken conceded a short inbreaker. McConkey got most of his touches on Oloken and Jones underneath, but never shook loose for explosive yards after the catch. Gadsden's touchdown came on Devin Lloyd in a mismatch, tight end seam versus middle linebacker. But Jacksonville never let that become a repeatable matchup. So structurally, Jacksonville's nickel and safety group won on time and leverage. They forced Herbert into either tight window throws or checkdowns that were tackled immediately. Herbert's passing profile. Herbert's charts are brutally consistent with what you see on film. Passing direction. Essentially no attempts deep outside left. A single deep right shot, the 30-yarder to Keenan. And most of the ball distribution short and intermediate between the numbers or just outside. Pressure splits. A significant share of his dropbacks came under some form of pressure. But Jax's pass rush grades, Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, Arik Armstead, show more of a contain and compress effect than free runners. When Herbert was kept clean, he was adequate. Under pressure, he slipped into the low 50s passing grade, with the interception and very little explosive payoff C, run game and blocking. The Chargers' run game was essentially a keep-them-honest series of calls. Team rushing, 13 carries for 41 yards, about 3.2 yards per carry. No touchdowns. Kimani Vidal, 5 carries, 13 yards, 2.6, almost all between the tackles. Herbert and Amar Johnson contributed a few carries, but nothing that tilted the math. Protection, interestingly, was not terrible. Pass blocking tables show Mekhi Becton, Jamari Salyer, Zion Johnson, and Trevor Penning all grading in the 80s for pass block efficiency, with very few total pressures allowed and essentially perfect true pass set numbers. Jags' pass rush did not live in the backfield. They produced 9-ish pressures and 1 sack on the day, but Herbert still averaged just 4.5 yards per attempt. That tells you the core offensive failure was coverage and separation, not protection. Jacksonville wins on the back end. The ball comes out short or late, and the Chargers' low-volume rushing never creates the easy mode they had versus Pittsburgh. 4 key leverage points that swung the game. 1. Middle of field stress versus Chargers linebackers. Jags deliberately hunted Henley and Perryman with Meyers and Munt in space that produced most of the explosive passing plays and sustained drives. Jacksonville's rundown consistency. 4 rushing touchdowns and 4.0 yards per carry are important. But more important is how often they avoided second and long. The run charts show constant 3 to 5 yards and forward fall, which protected Lawrence from long yardage, predictable dropback situations. Chargers' failure to force perimeter-heavy ball distribution. Your corners, Jackson, St. Juste, Cam Hart, actually held up well when the ball went outside, but the Jags barely had to throw true outside isolations. Everything funneled inward versus the weakest coverage players. Jags secondary versus Chargers receivers. No easy access. With Jarrian Jones in the slot and Antonio Johnson deep, Jacksonville closed off most of the short middle, pivot/option, and glance windows that are Herbert's comfort zone with Keenan and McConkey. Only 1 explosive to Keenan and a single mismatch touchdown to Gadsden is not enough volume situational football. Lawrence's EPA and success rate spike in the intermediate middle quadrants and off-play action. Where the Chargers were most stressed, Herbert's efficiency dies on 3rd down and under pressure, with Jacksonville winning the drive-ending downs. 5. Blueprint takeaways, Chargers-centric. If you're turning this into a tactical sheet for future Chargers-Jaguars or similar structures, defensively versus Jacksonville, treat linebacker coverage as the primary patch point. You either play more nickel juck dime with Molden's Mickens types in box-adjacent roles, or heavily pattern match with safeties on tight ends and backs, letting corners travel with Myers, Patrick, while avoiding true LB on TE man matchups. Use fronts that force Jacksonville to bounce runs laterally. When the Jags ran inside, LGML, they won with double teams. Tilt fronts, tight, mint, and run blitzes on early downs to create more 2nd and 8+, and unlock Mack, Tart, Tosh Caldwell on obvious pass. Offensively versus Jacksonville, You will not beat this defense by just spamming isolated perimeter routes into Jerrion Jones and Montaric Brown. The stats say they are comfortable living in those matchups. You can stress them with speed motion and stacks that create free releases for McConkey and OG2, forcing the Jaguars to pass off crossers rather than sit in static match coverage running backs on true downfield routes versus Oluokun and Lloyd, angle, rail, wheel. They kept checkdowns under control, but were stressed whenever routes attacked the seam. A more committed wide zone and play action package that gets them out of two high shells and into single high rotations. Opening glance and post-dig combinations for Herbert protection is good enough to hold up versus this pass rush. The fix has to be route design and leverage, not wholesale OL changes. Game flow lever. The entire game tilts if the Chargers get to 25 to 30 rushing attempts instead of 13. With their current pass pro and Herbert, you want Jacksonville in heavier personnel and base fronts, not nickel with a fresh pass rush. Structurally, this game looked nothing like the Pittsburgh script where you married physical run game with the explosives. It looked like a one-hand tied behind your back, pass-first slog. Beyond the surface inefficiencies on both sides of the ball, the deeper structural problem for the Chargers was how the sequencing of failures compounded. Early down run inefficiency created second and long. Second and long forced Herbert into shallow timing throws. Shallow timing throws produced no explosive plays. No explosives meant Jacksonville could play with capped coverage shells. Capped shells reduced yards after the catch. Reduced yards after the catch lowered drive success. Low drive success forced the Chargers into punting from poor field position. And poor field position gave Jacksonville short fields or neutral fields, which in turn amplified the run-heavy, low-risk script that they were already committed to. From a game flow standpoint, Jacksonville generated 3 field-tilting drives built on methodical run sequencing, inside zone, duo, wide zone, and counter, which steadily created 2nd and 4 and 3rd and 2 situations, downs where the Chargers linebackers were forced to widen or squeeze, both of which opened access for Trevor Lawrence's play-action boot, and Crosser's hidden yardage was also decisive. Jacksonville gained over 50 free yards in field flip value from punt exchanges and short kick returns, while the Chargers generated no return yardage and repeatedly started behind their own 20-yard line. Defensively, the Chargers' inability to force Jacksonville off script meant their best defensive asset, the perimeter cornerback duo, was irrelevant for long stretches. Jacksonville simply refused to throw at them, running only occasional isolation routes to keep them honest, instead funneling the offense through the linebackers with option routes, crossers, seams, and quick outs that stressed zone match rules. The Chargers' defensive front also lost the leverage battle in subtle ways. Jacksonville consistently won the horizontal displacement war, creating wideness in run lanes even without vertical movement, which allowed Travis Etienne Jr. and Paschal Tutin to press the front and cut back into weak side voids created by slow linebacker flow. On the offensive side, the Chargers' spacing and timing were compromised by Jacksonville's post-snap safety rotations. Antonio Johnson and Andrew Wingard repeatedly rotated down late into the hook and curl zones, reducing the Chargers' favorite intermediate access throws and forcing Herbert to hit checkdowns into coverage roofs that rallied quickly. This meant the Chargers' passing efficiency was not only low on a yards per attempt basis, but also structurally capped. Herbert threw into windows that had negative expected value even before the catch, because Jacksonville's match defenders forced routes toward defenders instead of away from them. Additionally, Los Angeles failed to create any drive starters, plays that generate chunk yardage early in a series, while Jacksonville produced at least one per scoring drive. which is why the Jaguars finished with 4 rushing touchdowns, despite relatively modest explosive play numbers. Coaching-wise, Jacksonville anticipated the Chargers' nickel-heavy approach and used motion and formation toggles, trips, reduced splits, tight alignments, to manufacture easy leverage for Meyers and Munt, while Los Angeles failed to counterpunch with pressure packages, simulated pressures, or late post-snap rotations designed to disrupt Lawrence's rhythm. Finally, the Chargers never gained control of schedule leverage, the combination of down, distance, and personnel that dictates play-calling freedom. Jacksonville lived in controllable downs, while Los Angeles repeatedly lived in predictable downs, allowing Jacksonville's defense to dictate terms and compress the entire offensive playbook. When combined with the Chargers' issues at linebacker, limited yards before contact in the run game, and an inability to create deep or intermediate separation, the final result was not a blowout driven by explosive plays, but a slow suffocation built on structural mismatches, tempo control, hidden yardage wins, and systematic exploitation of the Chargers' weakest coverage and run-fit defenders. Better defensive backs can dramatically improve linebacker performance because modern pass defense is built on layered zone match principles where each level depends on the levels behind it to cap routes, define leverage, and control space. When safeties and cornerbacks provide strong top-down structure, tight post-safety rotation, firm curl-flat overlap, physical slot reroutes, and disciplined seam carry depth, linebackers no longer have to turn and run vertically against tight ends, defend two-way option routes without help, or expand into windows that should already be capped, which reduces explosive plays and keeps them in their natural domain, fitting the run, driving on crossers, matching backs, and closing underneath throwing lanes. In the Chargers' case, the Jaguars exploited this exact structural weakness because the linebackers, Henley, Troy Dye, and Denzel Perryman, were repeatedly asked to defend space without backside safety overlap, particularly in the intermediate middle. On multiple plays, the linebackers were forced to robot turn, drop, flip, and find crossers, with no post-safety squeezing down on seam routes, leaving Henley essentially on an island against Meyers and Munt, matchups that almost no linebacker in the league wins consistently. When defensive backs handle more vertical seam responsibility and reroute slots at the line of scrimmage, the linebackers no longer need to attach to routes at 12 to 18 yards and can instead play downhill with proper leverage, shrinking windows rather than expanding them. This is why elite pass defenses, San Francisco in 2022, Denver in 2021, the Jets under Robert Saleh, show massive jumps when the defensive backfield solidifies. Coverage integrity reduces the linebackers' assignment stress, helps them trigger faster against the run, minimizes horizontal stretch, and forces quarterbacks to hold the ball longer, thereby increasing pressures and reducing the second-level exposure that plagued the Chargers against Jacksonville. From the opening snap, this felt less like a track meet and more like a psychology test for both sidelines. Jacksonville came in trying to erase the scars of a 26-0 fourth-quarter collapse to Houston, with Liam Cohen simplifying his plan and telling Trevor Lawrence to let it rip, after what the booth reminded us was the largest blown lead in franchise history. On the other side, Jim Harbaugh's Chargers entered at 7-3, one game back in the division, with a chance to finish the day in first place depending on Denver, Kansas City. The first offensive sequence immediately re-exposed Los Angeles' biggest structural issue: protection. On the first dropback, Travon Walker came nearly untouched off the edge, forcing Herbert into an intentional grounding call that reset the tone of the drive. The Chargers tried to settle with a screen to Trey Harris for about 12 yards and a quick game completion to Ladd McConkey on 3rd and 8. But they stalled short of the sticks and punted for Jacksonville's defense and coordinator Anthony Campanelli, forcing a 3-and-out with a sack against a high-powered offense right after last week's meltdown was framed as a major early psychological hurdle cleared. As the half unfolded, you could see Harbaugh and Greg Roman leaning into Herbert's mobility and early down efficiency. To stay in favorable down and distance, Herbert used scramble yards to offset tight coverage. But the broadcast highlighted how that style of contact-heavy escaping is probably not an advisable way to avoid contact for a franchise quarterback. Still, it set up what's become a core Chargers identity. They're the #1 team in the league at converting 3rd and short and 3rd and medium, precisely because they live in those situations more than anyone else. Jacksonville's defensive flaw, on paper, was their inability to generate consistent 4-man pressure. The booth called it a glaring weakness. Hines Allen, Travon Walker, and Arik Armstead are all capable, but the Jags simply haven't produced steady 4-man disruption. That showed up in pockets where Herbert had time to climb and escape, even as Jacksonville's secondary was asked to hold up in man-and-match coverages longer than they'd like. Cohen's answer was the opposite. Calm Lawrence down by doubling down on the run game and McVay tree sequencing. Starting from their own 40, holding a 1-point lead, Jacksonville leaned on Trevor Etienne and the ground game, mixing perimeter pitch, downhill zone, and tight end delays. The broadcast pointed out Etienne's evolution. He's not just a speed and tackle-breaking back anymore, but is running with authority, with the offensive line opening clean creases. On this drive, the Chargers' biggest defensive sin was the total absence of negative plays. Jacksonville's backs were consistently getting 2 or 3 yards before they get tackled by linebackers or safeties, a classic early down run-fit failure and yards before contact problem. The defining punch of that sequence came in the red zone. After Lawrence missed a huge opportunity on a tight end leak, Morris flashing wide open downfield while pressure from Khalil Mack sped up his mechanics. Cohen stayed aggressive. He dialed up a direct snap to Etienne out of a shift look, with Lawrence sliding left, resetting, and effectively becoming a decoy as Etienne took the snap and knifed straight up the middle for the touchdown. The broadcast called it one of the features of their offense, a run-heavy, illusion of complexity look that still lands in a simple, physical run between the tackles. And it stretched Jacksonville's lead while underscoring the Chargers' inability to disrupt run concepts at the line of scrimmage. The late first-half sequence became a hinge point. Down 14-6 with just over 3 minutes left before halftime, and knowing Jacksonville would receive to start the third quarter, the Chargers had to manufacture a momentum drive. After Darius Davis's return out past the 20, Herbert missed on first down. Vidal was swallowed quickly on second, and the Jags' defense again flashed with Walker limping, but still central to their pressure plan. Then Herbert finally got the explosive they'd been chasing, buying time in a clean pocket and hitting Keenan Allen on a scramble drill moonball, a Hall of Fame catch in traffic for about 30 yards that flipped the field and momentarily flipped the energy in the stadium. Even that surge came with Chargers-specific chaos. A holding flag on new left tackle Trevor Penning pushed them back into 2nd and 20, forcing Herbert to layer intermediate throws to McConkey and Allen just to get back to a manageable third down. Jacksonville, instead of leaning into their man coverage issues, sat in more zone and matched leverage beautifully. The booth noted how impressed they were with a secondary that had been attacked all season. in man looks now rallying and closing windows in zone. When Herbert's third down pass fell incomplete and Harbaugh kept the offense on the field for fourth down, the sequence captured the thematic tension of the half. Los Angeles could create moments of brilliance, but Jacksonville's coverage structure and situational defense continually bent without fully breaking. In sum, the first half framed the rest of the game's narrative beats. Jacksonville re-anchoring its identity through a balanced, ETN-centric run game and cleverly dressed direct snap designs. The Chargers living on the knife's edge between elite third down efficiency and protection-induced chaos. And a Jags defense that, after a historic collapse a week prior, started this one by clearing its psychological hurdles and matching structure to situation far better than the week before. Jim Harbaugh's post-game tone was blunt and unfiltered, openly acknowledging that the Chargers were overwhelmed in every phase and failed to match the physicality that defined last week's win over Pittsburgh. He confirmed Justin Herbert was evaluated for a concussion and cleared, but said the staff pulled him late because the offense wasn't running the ball, wasn't protecting, wasn't getting open, while the defense simultaneously stopped generating run fits or holding up in coverage. Harbaugh framed the performance as a total systems failure. Scheme, execution, coaching, personnel, and emphasized that the coming week without a game will be spent reassessing every possible aspect of what they're doing. When pressed about continued protection issues despite recent moves at tackle, Harbaugh admitted they simply didn't do a good enough job across the board and stressed that the onus is now on the entire building to respond like competitors and recalibrate both the plan and the people executing. Justin Herbert openly shouldered the blame for the Chargers' offensive collapse, acknowledging he was evaluated for a concussion, cleared, and returned, but that execution failed across the board. Turnovers, missed opportunities, no rhythm in the run game, and too many stalled possessions. Herbert repeatedly emphasized his role in the pressure issues, saying he needed to step up better in the pocket, get the ball out quicker, avoid unnecessary sacks, and trust his instincts when deciding whether to throw the ball away or extend plays. A balance he admitted he handled poorly on multiple snaps. He described the offense as never finding comfort or rhythm, pointing to the failure to establish the run, a sharp contrast to the Pittsburgh game, and the inability to hit easy completions or sustain drives on third down. Though visibly beaten up from weeks of hits, he framed it as part of the NFL and stressed that the upcoming bye week is crucial for physical recovery and resetting the offense, but reiterated that Sunday's performance wasn't good enough and starts with him playing better. Jim Harbaugh's 35-6 loss to the Jaguars closely mirrors the structural collapse seen in his 42-13 defeat against the Seahawks in 2012, with both blowouts defined by nearly identical failures at the line of scrimmage. In each game, Harbaugh's team was overwhelmed physically. His offensive line couldn't protect the quarterback, forcing the passing game into panic mode, while his defensive front seven, especially the linebackers, failed to fit the run, allowing the opponent to stay comfortably on schedule without exposing their quarterback. In both matchups, the opposing offense started conservatively, using boots, checkdowns, curls, and misdirection to attack Harbaugh's linebackers rather than his elite cornerbacks, resulting in easy completions and manageable downs. Meanwhile, the run game gashed his defenses, with Seattle's Marshawn Lynch in 2012 and Jacksonville's Tutin Etienne duo today generating chunk plays and yards after contact behind dominant offensive line play. On the other side of the ball, Harbaugh's offense became one-dimensional early, as protection breakdowns eliminated intermediate and deep concepts, leaving only screens, quick curls, and quarterback scrambles, mirroring the way Seattle's early pressure neutralized San Francisco's offense in 2012. In both games, the opponent established early momentum through immediate negative plays, created a field position imbalance, and never relinquished control. Ultimately, these two blowouts share the same DNA, losing both trenches decisively, linebackers crumbling in run fits, the opponent hiding its quarterback behind an efficient ground game, and Harbaugh's offense losing its structure before it ever had a chance to settle in. The AFC playoff picture tightened significantly after today's results, with movement across the wild-card race and a major shift in the AFC North. The New England Patriots, at 9-2, now control the inside track for the #1 seed, while the Indianapolis Colts, 8-2, remain close behind and firmly positioned for a first-round bye. Denver also stays steady at 8-2, comfortably leading the AFC West and projecting as the #3 seed. The biggest change of the day came in the AFC North, where the Pittsburgh Steelers improved to 6-4 and solidified their hold on the 4th seed, creating crucial separation from the Ravens, Bengals, and Browns. In the wildcard race, the Buffalo Bills' win pushes them to 7-3 and into the top wildcard spot, while the Los Angeles Chargers sit at 7-4 and slide to the second wildcard position. After their loss, Jacksonville remains in the 7th seed at 5-4. But their margin over Kansas City, 5-5, is slim, and the Chiefs now sit just outside the playoff line due to poor tiebreakers below them. Baltimore, 4-6, and Houston, 3-6, are fading. Overall, the top tier of the conference, New England, Indianapolis, and Denver, appears stable, while the Steelers' surge reshapes the middle of the bracket, and the Bills-Chargers-Jaguars grouping forms a highly compressed wild-card race that may swing weekly depending on head-to-head outcomes. The Chargers' most urgent roster priority is upgrading the linebacker coverage unit, which was the clearest structural liability against Jacksonville. Henley, Troy Dye, and Denzel Perryman collectively allowed perfect completion rates and explosive gains in the intermediate windows that account for nearly half of the Jaguars' passing yardage, neutralizing the Chargers' strongest defensive assets at cornerback. Secondary to that, the interior run defense, including both defensive tackle play and linebacker run fits, requires significant reinforcement, as Jacksonville produced 157 rushing yards, 92 yards after contact, and 4 rushing touchdowns while consistently winning first contact and reaching the second level. Offensively, the Chargers must secure a true starting running back capable of generating yards before contact, as the team produced only 0.23 yards before contact per attempt and relied almost entirely on post-contact yardage to reach a modest 3.2 yards per carry. The receiving corps needs a legitimate second option behind Keenan Allen, since Ladd McConkey was limited to low-depth targets. Quentin Johnston failed to separate, and no wide receiver consistently threatened the middle of the field when Allen drew attention. Similarly, the pass rush needs an additional creator opposite Khalil Mack, because the team generated only 7 total pressures on over 90 pass rush snaps, allowing Trevor Lawrence clean pockets on roughly 80% of his dropbacks. Depth and improvement along the offensive line, particularly in run blocking, remain necessary despite strong pass protection, as poor trench displacement undermined both the run game and the offense's ability to stay ahead of schedule. The Chargers also lack a running back who can function as a dynamic receiving outlet on third down, with backs combining for -1 receiving yard, and would benefit from a versatile safety capable of functioning in big nickel packages to reduce the burden on linebackers in coverage. Adding a true, dynamic tight end who can threaten the seam and stress linebacker matchups would give Herbert an intermediate weapon the current roster lacks. Finally, improving the return game would add hidden yardage the Chargers failed to generate, an important element for a team currently struggling to create explosive plays offensively.